There is a quieter version of Hallownest that almost feels impossible to imagine at first. Not the Hallownest found in ruin, with empty streets, broken elevators, infected crossroads, silent palaces, and the temple of the black egg sealed like a wound under the earth. Not the kingdom where the Pale King's answer to a dream plague was a perfect empty child, chained in darkness for the sake of everyone else. This other version begins earlier, before the last decision hardens into fate, before the dreamers close their eyes forever, before the hollow night is sealed away as the only hope left. It begins with 5 figures standing beneath a pale throne, each one remembered later only in fragments. Mighty Hegemol, fierce Drya, kindly Isma, mysterious Zima, and loyal Ogrim. In the history we know, they become relics, corpses, statues, memories and dreams. But in this other path, the 5 great knights do what Hallownest itself could not do. They look at the infection, understand that it is more than sickness, and decide the kingdom will not be saved by hiding its guilt inside a child. The question sounds simple. What if the 5 great knights defeated the infection? But the real answer cannot be simple, because the infection is not a beast that waits in a cave for a strong nail. It is a memory with teeth. It is the Radiance pressing herself back into the minds of bugs who forgot her. It is light returning as fever, worship returning as madness, unity returning without thought. A knight can cut an infected husk down in a corridor, but a nail cannot kill a dream by itself. That is why this version of the story has to begin with the knights understanding the shape of the enemy. Hallownest does not fall only because the Radiance is powerful. It falls because the kingdom tries to solve a spiritual wound through secrecy, sacrifice, and control. To defeat the infection, the knights must do more than protect the throne. They must correct the kingdom's deepest mistake. Hallownest was always a kingdom built from light competing with light. Before the Pale King, the moths remembered the Radiance, an old bright power who lived in worship and dream. Then the worm arrived, shed his ancient body at Kingdom's edge, became the Pale King, and offered smaller bugs something intoxicating: mind, order, kingdom, language, stone, roads, trams, archives, and a promise that Hallownest would last. Many accepted him. The moths turned away from their old creator and bowed toward a newer light. That forgetting is not a small detail. It is the buried pressure under the entire tragedy. The Radiance does not simply appear from nowhere as a villain. She returns from abandonment, and because she is a god of dream and memory, abandonment becomes infection when it is denied long enough. The Pale King sees the return of the Radiance and thinks like a monarch. He thinks in systems, locks, airs, seals, and containment. If the light cannot be reasoned with, it can be trapped. If no ordinary mind can resist her, then he will create something without a mind. If no will can stand against her, he will make something without a will. Down in the abyss, among void and shells and the darkness of an older civilization, the vessel plan begins to take shape. In the known story, that plan becomes the centre of Hallownest's doom. In this version, the knights hear enough, see enough, or sense enough to understand that the king's answer may preserve the kingdom's shape while destroying its soul. Hegemol is the first to notice the practical contradiction. He is remembered as towering and soft-spoken, a huge knight whose gentleness made his size more striking. A figure like Hegemol would understand weight. He would know what can be carried and what should never be placed on a single back. When the Pale King speaks of one pure vessel bearing the blinding light of a whole kingdom, Hegemol hears the strain in the idea. He knows armour distributes force. He knows a shield spreads impact. He knows that if a roof is collapsing, one pillar alone is not a plan, unless everyone has already accepted that the pillar will break. Hegemol may not speak often, but when he does, the room would hear the slow grief in his objection. No kingdom is saved by making one silent child hold every scream. Dryia understands the danger from another side. She is fierce, but the fragments around her also suggest care and wisdom. She guards the White Lady in the Queen's gardens, and in the world we know she dies there surrounded by the bodies of Mantis traitors. Dryia is not simply a blade. She is vigilance shaped into loyalty. She would see that the infection attacks more than flesh. It attacks trust, oaths, and memory. A court can lie to itself while still calling the lie strategy. Dryia would ask who protects the kingdom from the king's own desperation. She would not phrase it as rebellion at first. She is too disciplined for that. But she would feel the edge of it. A knight's duty is not always to agree with the throne. Sometimes it is to keep the throne from becoming another enemy. Isma sees the sickness as something moving through living systems. She is remembered as kind and strong, tied to the grove, acid, roots, and a blessing that lets another pass through corrosive water unharmed. Her power suggests transformation rather than simple force. Where others see infected bodies, Isma sees conduits, fluids, spores, roots, tunnels, habits, and the subtle movement of corruption from one place to another. To her, the infection is more than a scream in dreams. It is also a fever that finds pathways through the kingdom's neglected parts. The royal waterways, the fungal beds, the green roots, the low basins, the forgotten drains beneath the shining city, all of these matter. A plague does not conquer only by divine light. It conquers through the places a proud kingdom forgot to tend. Zima brings an outsider's mind to the crisis. She comes from lands serene, and carries with her the memory of delicate flowers, strange pale blooms with a rare power that does not fit neatly into Hellenist's theology. She is mysterious because she is never fully absorbed into the kingdom's story. That distance matters. She can love Hellenist without believing all of its myths. She can respect the Pale King without being dazzled by him. She can hear the word eternal and wonder what it costs. Zima would be the knight most willing to ask whether forgetting the radiance was itself a crime, and whether a kingdom built on erased worship can survive by erasing more lives in turn. Ogrim, the loyal one, is perhaps the hardest to move. In the known ruins, he remains in the royal waterways as the Dung Defender, waiting in duty, dreaming of the Pale Court, believing Hellenist can be reborn. He is brave, funny, devoted, and almost painfully faithful. That makes his role in this alternate history essential. If even Ogrim questions the vessel plan, the objection is no longer cynicism or outsider doubt. It is loyalty speaking from the heart of the kingdom. Ogrim does not oppose the king because he loves Hellenist less. He opposes him because he loves it too honestly to let a hidden horror become the foundation of salvation. His loyalty becomes larger than obedience. The five do not begin by defying the Pale King in public. That would break the kingdom before the infection does. Instead, they begin by watching carefully. Hegemol walks the routes near the forgotten crossroads and listens to miners mutter in their sleep. Dryer hears reports from the gardens, where roots twitch under a light that does not belong to Un or the White Lady. Isma studies the waterways and finds places where infected growth seems drawn toward warmth, waste and stagnant pools. Zima visits the resting grounds and speaks with moths who still remember old hymns they are ashamed to sing. Ogrim patrols below the city and notices that fear spreads faster when nobody is allowed to name what frightens them. Monoman the teacher becomes one of their first allies, though not without hesitation. Monoman understands archives, experiments, observation, and the terrible value of knowledge. In the known path, she becomes a dreamer, sealing the black egg through eternal sleep. In this path, Zima and Isma come to her before the final bargain is made. They ask her for a map of the infection as a phenomenon of dream. Monoman cannot offer comfort. The answers are grim. The radiance appears in dreams as light, and those who resist her memory suffer. Those who surrender lose themselves into a unity that looks peaceful only from far away. The mind is damaged and overwritten. A cure that ignores dream will always arrive too late. Lurien the Watcher listens from above the City of Tears. His tower is built for distance, but distance does not mean indifference. Lurien sees the city as motion, windows, sentries, rain, elevators, roofs, lamps and citizens crossing bridges under the endless fall of water. He knows where panic would begin if the infection fully reached the capital. He also knows that the city trusts the king's silence. If the throne admits too much, order may crack. If it admits too little, order becomes blindness. Hegemol speaks to him gently, because Hegemol understands how heavy watchfulness can be. Lurien does not join them openly yet, but he begins marking outbreaks not as isolated incidents, but as symptoms of one dream pressing through many eyes. Hurrah the Beast is more difficult. Deepnest has no reason to trust Halonest's polished answers. Hurrah knows bargains, bloodlines, dark tunnels, and the cost of accepting a Pale King's proposal. In the known story, she agrees to become a dreamer only after securing Hornet's birth, turning a kingdom's salvation into a personal and political exchange. In this version, Zima goes to Deepnest before the bargain closes, carrying no royal command. That matters. Zima speaks as someone who also knows love crossing borders. She does not ask Hurrah to sleep forever. She asks her to help prevent a future where everyone sleeps, because one king refused to speak honestly. Hurrah may laugh at that, but she would hear the difference. The first council of the 5 great knights does not happen in a grand hall. It happens somewhere lower, perhaps in a sealed maintenance chamber between the waterways in the city, where Ogrim feels at home and the king's advisors are less likely to listen. The 5 gather with maps, reports, old moth songs, water samples and fragments of infected shell. Hegemol has scratches on his armour from restraining civilians without killing them. Dryer carries a blade cleaned too many times. Isma brings roots wrapped around orange-stained stone. Zima lays a delicate flower on the table and watches how the infection recoils from its pale, quiet aura. Ogrim tries to joke, and fails. For the first time, they all understand that the kingdom has several weapons, but no single weapon is enough. Their plan begins with an idea the Pale King does not like. Hallownest must stop pretending the Radiance never existed. The infection feeds on forbidden memory. The more the kingdom treats her as an erased embarrassment, the more violently she returns in dream. Zima argues this most clearly. In lands serene, grief is not cured by denial. The dead beloved does not become peaceful because the living refuse to speak her name. A forgotten god is not the same as a defeated god. The moths, ashamed of their old worship, have become a locked door inside Hallownest's mind, and the Radiance is breaking through that door in every sleeping bug she can reach. This does not mean the Knights plan to restore worship of the Radiance. They are not fools. The Radiance offers unity without self, and that is another kind of death. But memory and surrender are different. Hallownest needs a way to remember her without kneeling to her. It needs a public truth strong enough to drain the secrecy from the dream. This is the first piece of the knightly answer, a kingdom-wide rite of honest remembrance. The Radiance must be named as an old light, a creator of the moths, a power wronged by erasure and dangerous in return. She must be given a place in history, but denied the right to devour the present. The second piece belongs to Isma. If the dream is the source, the body is still the battlefield. She begins transforming the grove into a living apothecary, not a cure in the simple sense, but a network of resistance. Roots are trained through waterways, cisterns and garden waterways. Acid pools are studied, diluted, redirected, and made into barriers where infected growth cannot pass easily. Fungal healers from the wastes are invited, carefully, because the mushroom clan understands shared thought better than most. Isma treats kindness as infrastructure. She knows that a sick kingdom needs cleaner water, safer sleep, quieter rooms, and routes where the fever cannot travel unchecked. Ogrim's work follows naturally from hers. The waterways are no longer treated as a shameful underside of the city. They become a defensive organ. Waste is cleared, pipes are sealed, infected matter is burned or drowned in prepared acid, and patrols learn to track the earliest signs of orange growth. Ogrim thrives in this work because it gives loyalty a bodily form. He is not simply guarding a door or praising a vanished king. He is keeping the city alive from below. He laughs again as the work deepens, not because the danger is gone, but because laughter keeps workers from becoming silent enough for the Radiance to enter easily. Hegemol takes the crossroads. In the known ruin, the forgotten crossroads become the infected crossroads after the seals weaken or certain powers awaken. In this alternate history, Hegemol refuses to let that central artery become a wound. He establishes resting stations, shield walls, evacuation routes, and bell signals that do not lead to panic. He teaches smaller guards how to hold infected bugs without hate when possible, and how to strike cleanly when mercy would only let the plague spread. His size becomes shelter rather than spectacle. Bugs who once looked up at him as a legendary figure begin to understand him as a wall that listens. Dryer's assignment is the Queen's Gardens, but her influence reaches beyond them. The gardens are not merely royal decoration. They are a contested border between the White Lady's root-like presence, the old green dream of Un, and the violent fracture of the Mantis traitors. In the known world, Dryia dies there defending the Queen from overwhelming force. In this path, the knights do not leave her isolated. Hegemol sends stoneworkers and shield-bearers. Isma sends root wards and acid-treated paths. Zima negotiates with mantises still loyal to honour. Ogrim opens a hidden supply route beneath the garden edge. Dryia remains fierce, but now her fierceness is connected to a living network rather than abandoned at a doorway. Zima takes the roads between enemies. She goes to the Mantis Lords, to the Resting Grounds, to the Edge of Deepness, and to places in the kingdom where court messengers would be killed or ignored. Her power is more than her nail. It is her ability to carry grief without turning it into conquest. The delicate flowers she brings from her distant home become more than symbols. They become wards at thresholds, placed where dream, void and infection might tear through one another too violently. Their pale power is gentle, but gentleness in Hollow Knight is often the rarest force. A flower that can survive a kingdom of blades may know something no throne understands. The Pale King resists all of this. He does not forbid the knights at once, because their work is effective enough to make open refusal difficult. Outbreaks slow. Panic lessens. Some infected bugs sleep peacefully after moth rites are restored in careful form. The waterways become safer. The gardens hold. Deepness does not attack. Yet the king cannot accept the heart of the plan because it challenges his deepest habit. He believes salvation must be engineered from above, perfected, sealed, and made eternal. The knight's answer is messier. It asks the kingdom to participate in its own rescue. It asks memory to be shared, not buried. It asks the king to admit that his light was not the first light, and may not be the final answer. The White Lady becomes the quiet hinge. In the known story, she withdraws into self-binding, aware of her part in the creation of the vessels and the cost of the Pale King's plan. In this path, Dryia and Isma reach her before withdrawal becomes destiny. Dryia speaks plainly because she loves too fiercely to flatter. Isma speaks gently because she knows shame closes like a root around the heart. They do not absolve the Queen. They do not pretend the abyss has not already been touched. But they offer a different form of penance. Instead of retreating forever, the White Lady can use her roots, her patience, and her connection to life to strengthen the living defence of Hallownest. Regret can become service before it becomes a prison. The abyss remains the darkest question. Even in this better version, the old experiments cannot be wished away. Vessels have been born. Shells lie where children should never have fallen. The Pale King's secret has already reached the point where the kingdom's moral injury is real. Hegemol is the one who descends first among the five, not because he understands void best, but because he believes the strongest should be the first to look at what the weak were forced to bear. He returns changed. He says little. His silence no longer feels soft. It feels like a stone door closing on the easy version of loyalty. Ogrim wants to follow him immediately, but Hegemol asks him to wait. Someone must keep the upper kingdom from collapsing while the lower truth is faced. This request wounds Ogrim, because duty often wounds the loyal more deeply than danger. He wants to stand beside his friend. Instead, he stands in filth and water and keeps workers moving. This is one of the places where the alternate story should remain bittersweet. Defeating the infection does not mean everyone gets to do the thing that feels heroic. Sometimes victory depends on staying at the post that hurts. Zima descends later with a delicate flower sealed inside a small vessel of glass and shell. The flower does not belong in the abyss. Its pale softness against the deep black feels almost indecent. Yet that wrongness is exactly why it matters. The flower's power is boundary. It does not conquer void, and it does not worship light. It simply refuses corruption from either side. In this version, Zima begins to understand that the final answer may require the ancient enemy of the Radiants, but only if the knights refuse to repeat the king's sin. They cannot throw children into darkness and call the result purity. They must ask darkness to stand as itself, not wear a child's shell. Monoman helps shape that thought into a theory. Void opposes the Radiance, but unshaped void is not a gentle cure. It is absence, hunger, depth, the memory of an ancient civilization that vanished beneath Hallownest before the worm arrived. The Pale King tried to put void inside living offspring and call the result an instrument. The knights seek another way. They will not make a vessel bear the radiance. They will create a temporary confluence, a place where dreamlight can be drawn downward and met by void under strict boundaries. Delicate flowers, white lady roots, Isma's acid conduits, and dreamer focus may hold the edges long enough. It is dangerous, uncertain, and far less elegant than the king's sealed child. That may be why it has a chance. The dream nail becomes essential. The moths cannot undo their history by hiding in shame. The seer or an elder among her people teaches the knights how dreams leave traces, how essence gathers, how memory can be cut without killing the body. This training is strange for warriors used to physical weight. Hegemol struggles because dreams have no mass to brace against. Dryer adapts quickly, treating thought like an opponent whose feints must be read. Isma listens rather than strikes. Zima recognizes dream as close kin to mourning. Ogrim finds it hardest and funniest, grumbling that no honest enemy should be allowed to attack while everyone is asleep. The Radiance notices them. That is when the story turns from preparation to war. Dreams across Hallownest begin changing. Citizens see a white palace burning in orange dawn. Moths hear old songs twisted into accusation. Miners in Crystal Peak swing at light that is not there. Bugs in Greenpath wander toward glowing spores with peaceful smiles. In the City of Tears, reflections in rainwater show wings above the towers. The infection becomes sharper because the knights have named its source. The Radiance is no longer pressing against a sealed silence. She is being challenged in the realm where she is oldest. Her first true attack comes through memory. She does not send a simple army. She shows each knight a version of Hallownest where their loyalty failed. Hegemol dreams he stands too slowly, and every small bug behind him burns. Dryer dreams she lowers her nail for one heartbeat, and the queen is devoured by light. Isma dreams her grove becomes a golden garden where every root sings without thought. Zemma dreams her beloved's grave opening under a false dawn, promising reunion if she kneels. Ogrim dreams the Pale King praising him while all his friends vanish behind the throne. These visions matter because the Radiance does not tempt only through power. She tempts through the deepest need each soul carries. Hegemol answers by refusing speed as the measure of worth. In his dream, he cannot reach everyone. That is the wound the Radiance presses. But he kneels, opens his arms, and shields those he can without pretending he is large enough to be everywhere. The dream fractures because it depends on impossible guilt. Hegemol learns that protection is not a fantasy of saving all lives with one body. It is the discipline of building shelter so others can protect each other too. When he wakes, he changes his crossroads strategy. More small guards are trained, more civilians learn evacuation routes. The kingdom becomes less dependent on giants. Drya answers by trusting care as part of fierceness. In her dream, the Radiance tries to make mercy look like weakness. Every time Drya hesitates, another infected shape advances. The temptation is to become pure blade, to cut everything uncertain. But Drya remembers the White Lady's sadness, the mantises who still keep honour, and the difference between discipline and panic. She defeats the vision by lowering her weapon only long enough to hear the living heartbeat under one infected shell. The moment is tiny, but it matters. Drya wakes knowing that the infection wants defenders to become executioners. She will not let it define strength for her. Isma answers by accepting that kindness must have borders. Her dream is full of golden roots asking to be healed. Every infected thing comes to her as a patient, and the Radiance whispers that refusal is cruelty. Isma almost breaks there, because compassion can be used against the compassionate. Then she sees the uninfected roots behind her beginning to glow. To save one fevered branch while letting the whole grove burn is not kindness. She cuts a root. She weeps in the dream, and the dream recoils. When she wakes, her medicine becomes firmer. Some places must be sealed, some water must not be shared. Care that cannot say no becomes another path for plague. Zima answers by refusing the Radiance's counterfeit reunion. Her beloved is dead, and grief makes any promise of return dangerous. The Radiance appears as light over a grave and offers a world where no one is separate, no one forgotten, no love lost, because all minds join in one burning song. Zima almost understands the appeal. Mourning is the ache of separateness. But love without separateness is possession wearing a holy face. She places a delicate flower on the grave and chooses the pain of memory over the comfort of being swallowed. The vision fails because grief remains grief, honest and unowned. Ogrim answers through laughter, but not foolish laughter. His dream tries to turn loyalty into blind praise. The Pale King appears perfect, the Pale Court shines, his fellow knights stand silent and obedient, and Ogrim is told that happiness means never questioning the light above him. At first he wants to believe it. Then he notices the silence. Hegemol does not laugh. Isma does not breathe. Drya's nail has no edge. Zama's eyes hold no stories. Ogrim laughs because the dream has forgotten that the people he loves are not statues. His laughter cracks the golden court. He wakes with tears in his eyes and a stronger loyalty than before, because it now includes the right to say no. After these attacks, the five understand the Radiance cannot be defeated by a single heroic charge. She must be deprived of her pathways. Isma and Ogrim narrow the physical spread. Zima and the Moths reshape public memory. Hegemol and Dryer protect the borders where panic might become massacre. Monoman builds a dream map. Lurien watches for changes in the city. Hera prepares Deepnest's resistance, not out of love for Hallownest, but because a shared dream plague would not respect old borders. The kingdom, for the first time, begins defending itself as a living whole rather than a collection of territories under a distant throne. The Mantis Lords become unlikely allies. They have never needed Hallownest's softness, and their honour is severe. But they understand discipline against infection. The Traitor Lord's fall shows what surrender to the Radiance can do to pride, ambition, and resentment. Zima's bond with the dead Mantis child helps open a narrow road of trust. She does not ask the Mantises to love the Pale King. She asks them to defend the dignity of choosing their own minds. That argument reaches them. In this version, the Mantis border becomes a hard line the infection cannot easily cross. Not because Hallownest commands it, but because the Mantises refuse to be owned by any light. The Moskin require a different approach. Greenpath belongs to Un's dream in ways Hallownest never fully understood. The Radiance's dream and Un's dream are not the same, and that difference becomes important. Isma travels there with reverence rather than royal authority. She listens to the old green silence and learns how a dream can create life without devouring will. Un's fading presence becomes a quiet counterexample to the Radiance. A higher being can call, shape, and remember without turning every follower into one mind. The green dream helps cool the orange fever, not by overpowering it, but by reminding infected sleep that other dreams exist. Crystal Peak becomes one of the hardest fronts. The crystals already hold light, resonance, and strange energy. The Radiance finds them useful. Miners hear songs in the stone. Beams flicker in tunnels. Bugs who work too long begin turning toward a brightness that feels like revelation and exhaustion at once. Hegemol cannot fit everywhere in the mines, so smaller teams must carry his doctrine of distributed shelter. Ogrim's waterway crews help build drainage and rest chambers. Monoman Order's work cycles shortened. The Pale King's administrators protest, lost production. Dryer answers with one sentence: a dead miner produces nothing. It is not gentle, but it ends the argument. The Soul Sanctum presents a more shameful struggle. The scholars there are already hungry for solutions that use soul, body, and experiment. In the known ruin, that hunger becomes grotesque. In this path, Monoman and Dryer intervene before desperation turns fully monstrous. They do not shut every experiment down, because the kingdom does need knowledge, but they forbid work that treats living bugs as raw material. This becomes one of the moral victories that quietly changes everything. Hallownest begins learning that survival without limits becomes another form of infection. The Radiance steals will through light. The desperate scholar can steal it through a scalpel. The knights must fight both. The king's response grows colder as the knights succeed. He should be relieved, but success outside his design unsettles him. The more the kingdom survives through shared effort, the less necessary his perfect secret becomes. The vessel plan still waits in the abyss, and the chosen child, the Hollow Knight, still exists. In this alternate path, the Hollow Knight becomes the living accusation against the king's imagination. The child was meant to be empty, pure, raised for one purpose. But the 5 great knights see signs of feeling, attachment, and recognition before it is too late to matter. Hegemol notices how the child turns toward praise. Ogrim notices how lonely it seems. Dryer notices that obedience is being mistaken for absence. Zima notices that a being can be silent and still not be hollow. The Pale King insists that no cost is too great. This time the phrase does not end the argument. Hegemol asks who pays. Dryer asks who chooses. Isma asks what grows from a root planted in regret. Zima asks whether eternity built on a child's burial is victory or fear. Ogrim, last of all, asks whether Hallownest reborn without honour would still be Hallownest. The room is silent after that, because Ogrim's question hurts most. He is the loyal one. If even he cannot call the plan honourable, the king has lost the easy shelter of obedience. The confrontation does not overthrow the Pale King. That would create a different disaster. Instead, the knights force a delay. The Hollow Knight will not be sealed while other measures still hold. The dreamers will not enter eternal sleep while a living dream defense can be attempted. The abyss will not receive another child. The king does not agree because he is convinced. He agrees because the 5 great knights, the teacher, the watcher, the beast and the queen, now form a pressure even a god king cannot ignore. For one rare moment, Hallownest's strongest servants save the kingdom by refusing to serve too quickly. The delay becomes a season of strange hope. Hallownest is still sick, but the sickness no longer moves through a kingdom pretending to be healthy. Notices are placed in stations and crossroads, not naming every horror, but admitting enough truth for ordinary bugs to change their habits. Sleep houses are built near guarded shrines. Moth elders teach safe remembrance in low voices. The archives collect dreams as carefully as maps. The waterways glow with work lamps instead of being left to rot. The gardens receive reinforcements. Deepness sends watchers who refuse royal banners but accept the need for shared warning. The kingdom feels less eternal, and because it feels less eternal, it becomes more alive. That change unsettles the Radiance more deeply than any one jewel could. She had returned through forbidden memory, through the pressure of being erased. But now Hallownest begins remembering her without surrendering. The moths light small lamps at the old shrines and speak of the first light as history, not command. Children are taught that dreams can lie, even beautiful ones. Miners are told to wake one another if songs in the crystal become too sweet. The radiance still burns in sleep, but the door she used is no longer hidden. A secret wound is easier for a god to infect than a scar everyone knows how to clean. The Radiance answers by changing tactics. If shame will not open the kingdom, longing might. She sends dreams of reunion, rest and unity. Tired workers dream of a golden field where no one owes wages or taxes. Mourning parents dream of lost children returning with bright eyes. Soldiers dream of a city without fear. Sick bugs dream of bodies that no longer ache. The danger is that these dreams are not entirely ugly. They touch real pain. Isma understands this first. A false cure can feel kind in the moment it stops the hurting. The nights begin teaching a harder truth. Not every peaceful dream is a safe dream, and not every shining comfort wants the sleeper to wake. Monoman creates the first dream wards, not as machines, but as disciplines. Before sleeping, bugs speak their names, the names of two friends, and one memory that belongs only to them. This sounds small, almost childish, but it matters. The Radiance's unity presses against individual selfhood. A sleeper who remembers a private joke, a favourite meal, a particular corner of the city after rain, or the sound of a loved one's uneven breathing has something to hold. Hegemol loves this practice because it gives ordinary bugs a shield of their own. Dryer respects it because it turns discipline inward. Ogrim makes it popular by turning the naming into a nightly ritual full of clumsy humour. Zima adds another piece from her distant homeland. She teaches that mourning should be spoken before sleep, not screamed, not hidden, not worshipped, but named. The dead do not become Radiance bait when the living admit they are dead. In the resting grounds, this changes the air. Graves that once sat under heavy silence receive flowers, words, and careful visits. The grey mourner in the known world is swallowed by one grief, but this Zima spreads grief into practice before it can isolate her. That does not make loss painless. It makes loss less available to a god who promises that no one has to remain separate. The Moth Tribe's role becomes painful and necessary. Some among them still feel guilt for abandoning the Radiance. Others fear that naming her will invite domination. A few secretly long for the old worship and must be watched carefully. The Knights do not force the tribe into one voice. That is part of the point. The Radiance offers a single burning chorus. Hallownest must answer with many voices that do not merge. Old Moth hymns are rewritten as laments rather than prayers. The difference is subtle, but in Dream, subtle things matter. A hymn that says we remember is safer than one that says we return. The Temple of the Black Egg changes purpose under this plan. In the known story, it becomes the locked chamber around the Hollow Night, sealed by the Dreamers. In this path it is prepared as a controlled meeting point between dream, shell, void, root, and flower. The egg is still a place of containment, but the thing contained is no living child. Hegemol oversees the outer shell work. Isma threads root and acid conduits around its buried approaches. Zima places delicate flowers in protected alcoves, each one guarded as if it were a sleeping monarch. Ogrim designs lower drains that can flood or clear the chamber if infected growth breaks through. Dryer trains the guard not to look at the light too long if the rite begins. The Hollow Night is moved away from the centre of the plan. That does not mean the child is suddenly free in the way a normal child might be free. Nothing about its birth can be undone. But the Knights insist it must not be treated as an object already spent. The White Lady is the one who finally reaches toward it with visible grief. The Pale King watches, silent and rigid. Hegemol kneels before the child because towering over it feels wrong. Ogrim whispers some foolish boast about how every knight should learn to stand in muck at least once. The hollow knight does not laugh. Maybe it cannot, but its head turns toward him, and that slight motion is enough to condemn the old plan all over again. Hornet's existence shifts too, though she is still young in this imagined timeline, or perhaps not yet old enough to understand the web around her. Hera watches the courts change with suspicion. If the dreamer bargain no longer requires eternal sleep, Hornet's life no longer begins as the payment for a seal in quite the same way. She remains the daughter of a political bargain, but the bargain becomes less final, less sealed in grief. Hera still demands that deepness not be treated as a royal tool. Dryar respects that. Zima understands it. The future Princess Protector of Hallownest grows under a sky where the adults around her have, for once, refused the easiest sacrifice. The Radiance cannot allow that refusal to stand. Her next assault comes through the city bells. The City of Tears is full of sound, rain, lifts, footsteps, distant metal, and the softened echo of water on stone. One night every bell in the city rings at once, though no visible hand pulls the ropes. Citizens wake with orange light behind their eyes. Lurien sees patterns from the Watcher's spire, clusters of sleepwalkers moving toward the central lifts, all facing the same unseen dawn. Hegemol marches into the streets with shield squads. Ogrim comes up from below, soaked and grinning like fear has personally offended him. Dryar orders the bells cut down if needed. Monomon begs for a moment to understand the rhythm. The rhythm is old moth pattern, twisted. Zima recognizes it after the third sequence. It is not a command to worship, it is a command to gather. The Radiance is trying to concentrate minds in the capital, turning the city itself into a dream amplifier. If enough sleepers gather under the same ringing, their dreams may align, and aligned dreams give the Radiance a larger door. The answer must be sound against sound. Ogrim starts first, because subtlety has never been his gift. He sings an old knight's marching song badly, loudly, and with such stubborn cheer that nearby guards join from sheer disbelief. Then the moths answer with the corrected lament. The bells are still ringing, but the city no longer hears one rhythm. This scene matters because it shows why the 5 great knights can succeed, where the king alone cannot. The Pale King's plan depends on silence, isolation, and one perfect container. The knight's plan depends on messy resistance spreading through everyone. Hegemol shields bodies. Dryar directs movement. Isma calms infected sleepers with treated water and root incense. Zima breaks the false hymn. Ogrim turns fear into communal noise. Lurien watches, Monoman interprets. Hera's messengers seal side routes before panic reaches deepnest. No part is perfect, but together they deny the Radiance the beautiful simplicity she wants. After the Bell Night, the Pale King can no longer claim the crisis is best handled in secret. The city saw too much. The court heard too much. Citizens know that something bright and ancient is reaching for them in sleep. Panic could still ruin everything, but truth has its own stabilizing force when spoken carefully. Hegemol addresses the city from below the gate, not as a politician, but as someone large enough to be seen and gentle enough to be believed. He does not promise eternity. He promises work, vigilance, and the presence of those sworn to protect them. It is less glorious than a royal decree. It helps more. Dryar begins reorganizing the knights and guards into circles instead of chains. In a chain, every command flows downward from the throne. If the throne is wrong or slow, everyone suffers. In circles, each district has defenders trained to identify dream fever, move sleepers safely, and resist panic without waiting for palace orders. This change is quiet, but revolutionary. It makes Hallownest less dependent on one pale mind. Dryar does not call it revolution, she calls it readiness. Yet the meaning is clear enough. The kingdom will not survive as a body if all its nerves must report to one distant head before moving. Isma's work becomes stranger as the infection adapts. Some infected growth begins surviving ordinary acid barriers. It sprouts pale orange blisters near drains and sends small light seeds skittering through cracks. Instead of despairing, Isma studies the adaptation with sorrowful patience. She learns that the infection loves neglected matter, old corpses, stagnant pools, forgotten eggs, abandoned shells, sealed rooms, anything the kingdom refuses to tend. This discovery changes her from healer into historian of decay. She tells the court that rot is not merely biological, it is political. Every place Hallownest abandoned is now easier for the Radiants to claim. That statement sends Ogrim into the oldest sections of the waterways, where even he rarely goes. There he finds chambers from before the current city, pipes leading nowhere, failed cisterns, and storage rooms full of discarded idols. Some are king's idols, cracked and unwanted. Some are older shapes, perhaps radiant symbols scraped from public life and hidden below. The infection glows around these buried relics. Ogrim understands, with a heaviness unusual for him, that Hallownest literally built its shine over the things it did not want to remember. He brings the relics upward instead of destroying them. Zima approves. The Pale King does not. The relic procession becomes one of the turning points. Old radiance marked stones, broken moth carvings, damaged idols, and forbidden tablets are carried through the city under guard. Some citizens spit, some tremble, some kneel from old instinct before being gently raised. The relics are not restored to worship, they are restored to history. Lurien watches for riots and finds fewer than expected. Monoman preserves names and reactions. Hegemol walks beside the largest stone, hand resting on it as if calming a frightened animal. This is how a kingdom begins to make peace with the fact that its past was never as pure as its architecture pretended. The Radiance reacts with fury. For 3 nights, no one in Hallownest dreams normally. Sleep becomes a battlefield of white platforms, falling swords, molten sunlight, and voices promising that individuality is loneliness. The knights enter those dreams through a dangerous rite created by Monomon and the Moth Elders. They cannot stay long. Living minds are not built to walk that close to a higher being's anger. Each knight carries a different anchor. Hegemol a shard from his own armour, Dryar a thorn from the Queen's gardens, Isma a drop of acid sealed in root, Zemma a flower petal, Ogrim a small crest given by the king before all this began. The anchors remind them who they are when the Radiance tries to turn them into light. The first dream battle is not the final one, but it teaches them the cost. Hegemol absorbs beams that are not beams but accusations. Every flash tells him he is too late, too slow, too large to notice the small. Dryer cuts through sword rain that whispers the names of everyone she cannot protect. Isma tries to heal infected dream shapes and nearly loses herself when they sing with grateful voices. Zima sees her beloved walking ahead through a meadow of impossible brightness. Ogrim is offered a hallow nest where the Pale King embraces him and the others cheer without doubt. They survive, but they wake bleeding essence from their eyes, and every one of them understands why the king feared a direct war in Dream. Fear, however, is no longer enough to choose the child's prison. The Hollow Knight watches them recover. This detail matters. The child meant to contain the radiance sees the greatest knights in Hallownest hurt themselves to prevent that fate. Even if its mind is quiet, the image enters whatever place in it can receive meaning. The different bond forms, not the secret fatherly bond that tarnishes the known vessel, but a communal one. The Hollow Knight is no longer the king's perfect tool. It becomes a protected witness to the kingdom deciding, too late but still meaningfully, that it should not have been made for this burden. Hurrah names the obvious risk. If the knights fail, the kingdom may have lost the time needed to seal the radiance before she grows stronger. The Pale King seizes on this coldly. Delay has consequences. Mercy has consequences. Defiance has consequences. Zima answers that cruelty has consequences too, but it hides them better at first. Hera respects that answer more than she expected. Deepness joins the Dream defense after this, not with trust, but with a shared understanding that any plan built on living sacrifice must be questioned by those asked to pay for it. The Watcher Knights become part of the physical defense in a different way. In the known ruin, they are dead shells animated by infected flies. In this path, Lurien refuses to leave his own protectors as hollow symbols waiting for a future plague. They are trained in rotating watches, inspected for dream fever, and bound into the city circles Dryer established. The change seems practical, but it has symbolic weight. Hallownest stops leaving armour empty. Empty armour is too easy for infection, ambition or memory to inhabit. The kingdom begins filling its defences with responsibility rather than appearances. The old stagways reopen as emergency arteries. The last stag is not yet last, and the stations become more than travel points. They carry medicines, warnings, flowers, root cuttings, moth histories, and small groups of dream-sick bugs towards safer houses. Hegemol personally thanks the stag workers, which embarrasses them and gives Ogrim material for teasing him for weeks. This gentleness is not decorative. It shows Hallownest remembering the labour that made it a kingdom. The Radiance wants one blazing unity. The knights answer with thousands of particular duties, each one small enough to be real. At the edge of the hive, the bees remain distant. Their queen has little interest in Hallownest's panic. Yet even there, the infection's dreamlight presses at the borders. Zima visits with no demand, only warning. The hive's independence becomes another lesson. Not every community must love Hallownest to resist the radiance. The infection threatens selfhood itself, so even proud isolation has a reason to stand firm. The hive seals itself more carefully, and though it sends few troops, it shares wax, medicines, and a method of preserving delicate things in hardened chambers. Isma uses that knowledge to protect flowers near the Black Egg. Kingdom's Edge becomes a place of ash and memory. The cast-off shell of the worm lies there, proof that even a god can abandon one body and become another story. The Radiance sends visions there often, perhaps because the site marks the beginning of the Pale King's claim. Bugs stationed near the old shell dream of transformation, of shedding pain and becoming pure light. Drea patrols the region herself for a time. She does not trust symbols to behave. The worm's old body reminds everyone that rebirth can be sacred or monstrous depending on what is left behind. Hallownest must not shed its guilt and call the new skin innocence. The White Palace begins to flicker. In the known story, it eventually vanishes into dream, hidden with the king. In this alternate path, the palace tries to withdraw and cannot fully do so because the queen's roots, the dreamer's vigilance and the knight's pressure keep the kingdom's centre connected. The Pale King becomes more isolated inside rooms that no longer obey him completely. This is not treated as triumph. A desperate god is still dangerous, and the Pale King's fear is not entirely selfish. He sees futures others cannot see clearly. He sees failure branching. He sees Radiance victory, void hunger, kingdom ruin. The tragedy is that foresight without humility becomes another prison. Monoman proposes the final rite after studying the dream battles, the relic procession, the flowers and the abyss. The infection cannot be defeated while the Radiance remains able to invade the kingdom's dreams freely. She must be confronted at a central point where memory, dream and void meet. The Black Egg can serve as the shell. The dreamers can form living seals for the duration of the rite without entering eternal sleep. The White Lady can root the boundary. Zima's flowers can keep void from spilling outward. Isma's conduits can redirect corrupted essence into acid blight filters. Hegemol and Dryer can hold the dream assault. Ogrim can guard the lower breach and keep the physical chamber from failing. The Hollow Knight will be present only as witness, never as container. The Pale King asks what happens if the Radiance cannot be destroyed. The answer is honest. Then she must be diminished, bounded, and remembered without being obeyed. This is less satisfying than annihilation. It may not sound like victory to a ruler who wants eternity. But the infection is not merely the Radiance's existence. It is her uncontrolled invasion of minds. To defeat the infection may mean ending the plague without pretending an ancient light can be erased from all memory. Zima is firm on this point. The kingdom already tried forgetting. Forgetting became a door. Preparations for the rite take 7 days. That number is not sacred in Hallownest, but it becomes memorable because each day belongs to one form of defence. Hegemol's day strengthens the shell and outer roads. Dryer's day trains the guards in silence, movement and emergency withdrawal. Isma's day carries root and water through hidden passages. Zima's day places flowers and teaches the final remembrance. Ogrim's day clears the lower chambers and leaves jokes scratched into workstones to keep fear from settling too heavily. The 6th day belongs to the dreamers, who align teacher, watcher and beast, without surrendering their lives to sleep. The 7th belongs to the queen, who touches the black egg with roots pale enough to tremble. The king has no day. That is deliberate and devastating. He has shaped too much already. For once, Hallownest's salvation will not be another monument to his will. He may stand present, lend power if needed, and witness what is Night's attempt, but he cannot own the right. This wounds him more deeply than anyone says aloud. Ogrim feels guilty about it. Drya does not. Hegemol remains sad. Isma prays in whatever way roots pray. Zima places one flower near the king's path, perhaps as pity, perhaps as warning. The Pale King looks at it and says nothing. On the night before the rite, the five sit together in a chamber beneath the city. No throne, no banners, no courtly crowd. Hegemol polishes armour that may crack before dawn. Drya sharpens her nail without hurry. Isma braids small root charms for each of them. Zima tells a story from lands serene about a warrior who won a battle by refusing to enter it until he understood what the battle wanted from him. Ogrim complains that mysterious stories should come with clearer endings. They laugh, and that laughter may be one of the last truly safe sounds in Hallownest before the light comes. Ogrim asks whether they will all meet again after. In the known ruin, his dream self clings to that promise with heartbreaking innocence. Here the question is asked before the loss, not after. No one answers quickly. Hegemol says he expects Ogrim will be too loud to lose. Isma touches Ogrim's hand and says no oath can command the future, but love can make a road toward it. Drya says they will do their duty and discuss reunions when duty permits. Zima smiles with the sadness of someone who knows reunion cannot be promised cheaply. Ogrim accepts all of these as answers, because he has always known how to turn fragments into hope. The hollow night is brought to the outer chamber at dawnless morning, though dawn in Hallownest is always a strange idea underground. The child stands near the White Lady, silent, tall, and unfinished by fate. The Pale King does not touch it. Perhaps he wants to. Perhaps he does not know how, without making the old mistake stronger. Hegemol kneels again and tells the child that no one will ask it to hold the light alone. The words may not be understood, they still need to be said. Sometimes a vow matters even when the one protected cannot answer. Hornet, if present as a small figure near Hera, would remember only images, huge Hegemol bending low, Ogrim smelling of earth and bravery, Drya like a drawn line, Isma pale green and gentle, Zemma with a flower that everyone treats as more dangerous than a blade. This memory would shape her later. In another world, Hornet grows up guarding ruins and testing vessels. In this world, she grows up having seen adults refuse a sacrificial answer. That does not make her soft. It makes her sharper in a different direction. She learns that protection can include disobedience. The rite begins without music. That choice comes from the moths. The Radiance has twisted enough songs. Silence is safer at first. Monoman opens the dream path with careful focus. Lurien anchors the visible world from above, watching every movement around the temple. Hera brings the weight of beast mind, stubborn and dark, refusing to be lulled. The White Lady's roots close around the chamber like pale fingers. Delicate flowers glow in their alcoves. Far below, controlled passages to the abyss open by inches, and the air changes as Void remembers the presence of its ancient enemy. The Radiance arrives not as a body, but as a sunrise that should not exist underground. Every sealed crack shines. Every sleeper in the kingdom stirs. Every old moth carving warms. The black egg trembles as if something enormous has turned its face toward it from inside the dream realm. Hegemol plants his feet. Drya lifts her nail. Isma steadies the roots. Zima whispers the remembrance, naming the radiance as Old Light, First Wound, Mother of Moths, Danger of Dreams, one who was forgotten, and one who may not devour. Ogrim stands at the lower breach, and, because fear hates absurdity, mutters that if the sun wants to enter his waterways, it can wipe its feet first. The dream opens. Inside the dream, there is no temple at first. There is only heightened burning. The 5 great knights stand on white platforms suspended in a sky made from every forgotten prayer Hallownest buried. The radiance is above them, vast and wounded, her wings a crown of blades and dawn. She does not speak in a normal voice. She speaks through recognition. Every knight feels her not as sound, but as a memory that tries to become command. Remember me. Return to me. Be whole inside me. The words are almost beautiful, and that is the danger. If she sounded only monstrous, resistance would be easier. Instead, she sounds like the end of loneliness. Hegemor moves first because someone must make the dream feel solid. His armour, made for corridors and gates, should be useless in a realm of light. Yet he treats the platforms as if they are stone under siege. When beams burst outward, he does not try to chase the radiance. He lowers himself and becomes cover. The dream reshapes around that choice. Behind him appear faint outlines of ordinary bugs, miners, scribes, hatchlings, old workers, stag attendants, city guards, and waterway labourers. He understands then that his role is not to strike the highest blow. His role is to prove that the small can stand behind something without being consumed by it. The radiance punishes him for that. Light pours over his armour until old cracks reopen. She shows him every citizen who will still die even if he wins, every tunnel he cannot reach, every frightened child born too far from his shield. Hegemor feels his sighs become accusation. Then he remembers the Crossroads defence and the lesson his earlier dream taught him. He is not the whole shelter. He is one shelter teaching others how to shelter one another. He drives his great weight into the platform, and from the point of impact, dream walls rise behind him. Not eternal walls, not perfect walls, enough walls. In a story obsessed with impossible purity, enough becomes holy. Drya enters through the gaps Hegemor creates. Her movement is clean, fierce, and almost silent. The radiance fills the air with swords of light, each one falling along a line of possible failure. Drya reads them like an enemy formation. She does not waste motion on hatred. She cuts where cutting matters and leaves what can be endured. This is how she differs from the infection. The radiance turns every thought into totality. Drya works through distinction. Threat here, not there. Save this one first, then that one. Move now, stop now, strike now, wait. Discipline becomes a language the dream cannot easily swallow. The radiance tries to turn Drya's care against her by showing the Queen's gardens overrun. The White Lady's roots glow orange. Mantis traitors pile against the path. 1,000 voices whisper that Dryer's love is merely delay, that every guarded door eventually falls, that all protectors are only future corpses. Dryer sees her own body in the garden, the death she suffers in the known world, surrounded by enemies and still facing the door. For one instant, destiny reaches toward her. Then she steps past the image of her corpse. She does not deny that she may die. She denies that death means failure. Her nail cuts the vision from the root upward, and the garden behind it turns dark green instead of gold. Isma does not fight like the others. She kneels on the dream platform and presses both hands into a surface that has no soil. That should be impossible, but dreams obey need when need is old enough. Roots grow from her palms, pale and green, threading through cracks in the white world. The radiance burns them. Isma lets them burn. She has learned not to save every root. The surviving ones curl around infected dream motes and draw the fever downward toward the prepared conduits below the black egg. In the waking chamber, acid filters begin glowing. Ogrim sees the first orange surge pour through the drains and yells for the lower teams to open the blight locks. Isma's trial comes as a chorus of sick voices. They beg her to heal them by joining them. They tell her separation is pain. They show her a kingdom where no one suffers, because no one remains alone enough to suffer. It is the Radiance's cruelest kindness. Isma weeps inside the dream, but her roots do not stop. She answers without anger. Pain is not proof that the self should be erased. A wound can be tended without dissolving the wounded. Her roots tighten, not as chains, but as boundaries. Orange light drains into green, and for a moment the dream smells of rain after drought. Zemma climbs higher, while the others hold the lower sky. She is not trying to reach the radiance by force. She follows the paths of memory, where the white platforms become graves, old roads, forgotten gardens, and the far serene land from which her flowers came. The Radiance understands grief too well. She appears to Zemma as every lost beloved Hallownest has ever used as a reason to surrender. Dead Mantis child, dead Moth mother, dead miner, dead guard, dead sibling, dead vessel. Each figure asks to be held again in light. Zima's hand trembles. She knows the cruelty of refusing a loved face. Her delicate flower does not blaze. It does not argue with the radiance in equal brightness. It remains small. That is its power. Zima places it on the dream path, and its aura creates a circle the false dead cannot cross. Not because the flower hates them, but because it honours the boundary between memory and possession. Zima says goodbye again, and again, and again, to faces that are not truly the dead, but are shaped from her need for them. Each goodbye becomes a step upward. The Radiance recoils from this, because her promise depends on the idea that no goodbye should ever have to remain final. Ogrim's battle is half in dream and half below it. His body guards the lower breach, where controlled void presses upward, like an ocean remembering an enemy. His dreaming self stands beside the others, wearing his white defender shape, bright with loyalty and ridiculous courage. The Radiance hurls shame at him. She shows him a future where his friends are gone, and he is left making statues from filth, waiting for a reunion that never comes. She shows him laughter curdled into loneliness. She shows him loyalty mocked by time. Ogrim staggers, because this future is close to truth in another world. Then he does something the Radiants cannot use. He laughs at himself. Not at the loss, not at his friends, but at the grand golden vision's failure to understand him. Yes, he may be ridiculous. Yes, he may remember too warmly. Yes, he may make statues from whatever material he has and call them beautiful because love is stubborn. But that does not make his loyalty false. It makes it alive. He raises the Defender's crest and the dream fills with the scent of earth, water, labour and bodies that refuse to become elegant symbols. The Radiance wants clean worship. Ogrim answers with loyal mess. The dream battle shifts. The Radiance, unable to break the night separately, tries to overwhelm the entire field. Swords rain, beams burst, walls of light cross from every side, and orbs drift like small suns seeking thought. Monoman strains to keep the path open. Lurien sees the black egg shake hard enough to crack out a stone. Hurrah growls in sleep, anchoring the right with the stubbornness of deepness. The White Lady's roots burn at their tips. Flowers tremble in their alcoves. The Pale King, watching at last, raises one hand as if to intervene with some hidden power. Dryer, without looking back, tells him no. The word crosses dream and waking alike. That refusal saves them. If the king poured his will into the right, the Radiance would have an old rival to seize, a light against light struggle that might flatten every smaller mind nearby. The knights are not winning because they are stronger gods. They are winning because they are not gods. They do not meet her with one equal command. They meet her with 5 partial virtues, 3 mortal dream anchors, 1 rooted queen, 1 hidden people of moths, 1 dark nation of beasts, 1 watching city, and a kingdom full of named sleepers holding private memories like candles in cupped hands. The Radiants cannot easily swallow a people who are finally many on purpose. The hollow knight feels the dream from the outer chamber. Its shell trembles. The old design inside its life still wants to answer the Radiance's call as container, because everything around its creation taught it that purpose was burden. The child takes one step toward the black egg. Hegemol cannot see from inside the dream, but somehow he senses it. Perhaps vows create their own kind of dream path. He speaks the child's name, though no true name is known. He calls it Little Knight. He tells it to stay, not as command, but as release. For the first time, the Hollow Knight's stillness becomes choice rather than programming. It stops. That moment changes the dream. The Radiance had expected the vessel-shaped wound in Hallowness to remain useful. The kingdom had made emptiness for her, and even if the knights refused to use it, she could still press on its purpose. But when the Hollow Knight refuses to step forward as sacrifice, the old path closes. The Radiance loses the easiest container and the easiest accusation. She can no longer say the kingdom secretly agrees with her, that every mind wants to become part of a higher will. One made for surrender has declined surrender. The dream sky flickers. Zima sees the opening. She reaches the highest platform, where the Radiance's face is almost too bright to perceive. She does not strike. She offers the final remembrance, the one the moths feared to speak. She names the Radiance as wronged. Then she names her as wrong. This balance matters. Hallowness did erase her. The Pale King did replace her. The moths did abandon her. But pain does not grant the right to enslave every dream. Zima sets a flower at the edge of the Radiance's light and says, in effect, you will be remembered, but you will not be obeyed. The flower survives. The Radiance screams, and the scream travels into every infected body in Hallownest. Orange eyes widen. Husks freeze. In Crystal Peak, miners collapse instead of attacking. In Greenpath, mossy bodies shudder against the roots holding them. In the waterways, light seeds burst from cracks and are swept into acid locks. In the city, sleeping bugs wake crying, not cured yet, but themselves enough to know they are crying. This is the first sign of real victory. Not silence, not instant purity, the return of individual grief. Now the void rises, not wild, not child-shaped, not given a stolen shell. It rises through conduits bounded by flower aura and root. A black tide with no face. The Radiance recognizes her ancient enemy and turns from the nights toward it. This is the most dangerous second of the rite. If void breaks loose, Hallownest may trade golden infection for black ruin. Isma holds the roots. Zemma holds the flowers. Monoman holds the dream geometry. Hurrah holds the beast line against panic. Lurien calls out fracture points from the tower. Ogrim, sweating and shaking at the lower breach, uses every ounce of strength to keep the flood from becoming hunger. Hegemol and Dryer move together. He shields. She advances. He takes the wide fury of the Radiance's beams. She cuts the narrow threads tying the infection to the sleepers below. They have fought beside each other for years, but this is the purest form of their partnership. Strength and precision. Shelter and edge. Hegemol cannot reach the Radiance's core. Dryer cannot survive the full light without him. Together they make a road, and behind them Isma's roots cool the path, Zemma's flower marks the boundary, and Ogrim's laughter, strained now into something almost like prayer, keeps the lower world from breaking. The Pale King watches the road form and understands, perhaps too late, what he never learned. He wanted a perfect solution because imperfection frightened him. He wanted a vessel without mind because minds can disobey, grieve, misunderstand, love and fail. But the road forming before him is made entirely of minds doing those fragile things together. The 5 great knights are not pure. Monoman doubts, Lurien fears, Hurrah mistrusts, the White Lady regrets, Ogrim jokes when afraid, Zima mourns, Dryer hardens, Hegemol hesitates. The Hollow Knight feels. None of that ruins the plan. It is the plan. The Radiance tries one final temptation, not toward the knights, but toward the king. She shows him Hallownest eternal if he will seize control of the right and turn it back into containment. A brighter black egg. A cleaner vessel. Dreamers sealed perfectly. The 5 great knights honoured as statues after being used. A kingdom that lasts because every disobedient part is folded into design. The vision is beautiful in the way tyranny can be beautiful from a distance, orderly, silent, shining, relieved of argument. The Pale King nearly reaches for it. Then the Hollow Knight turns its head toward him. That small motion breaks the vision more thoroughly than any accusation. He lowers his hand. The dream road reaches the Radiance's core. In the known ending, the void consumes her after the knight enters the dream of the Hollow Knight. In this alternate version, the end is less total and more ceremonial. The knights cannot fully erase a higher being of memory without becoming what the king tried to become. Instead, they cut the infection from her worship. Drea severs the command. Isma drains the fever. Hegemol shields the sleepers from the backlash. Ogrim holds the lower breach. Zima keeps the flower between remembrance and surrender. Void rises only high enough to devour the plague body, the screaming excess, the part of the radiance that has become contagion rather than memory. What remains is small compared to the blinding god who entered. A pale mothlight, wounded, furious and ancient, held beyond reach by flower, root and dream. It is not harmless. It may never be harmless. But it is no longer spilling through every sleeping mind. Zima bows her head, not in worship, but in acknowledgement. The Moth Elders do the same from the waking world. The Radiance is remembered. She is not enthroned. She is not erased. In that difference, the infection loses its kingdom. The backlash nearly kills them. Hegemol's armour cracks open in 3 places. Drea falls to one knee, nail buried in the dream platform to keep herself upright. Isma's roots blacken at the ends and smoke with acid bright vapour. Zima loses every flower petal she carried except one. Ogrim is thrown across the lower chamber and laughs only after making sure the breach has closed. Monoman collapses in the archives. Lurien goes blind for several hours from watching too much light. Hurrah wakes snarling and alive. The White Lady pulls her roots back with a sound like a forest exhaling after fire. Across Hallownest, the orange glow fades unevenly. Some infected husks simply fall, the minds inside already gone beyond return. Some wake confused, ashamed, hungry, and terrified. Some remain dangerous for days, caught between dream and body. The victory is not clean. That is important. If every bug snapped back to perfect health, the story would become too easy for Hollow Knight's world. The infection is defeated as a ruling force, but damage remains. Families still grieve, mines still bury their dead, the waterways still stink, the Soul Sanctum still has questions to answer, the Abyss still exists. A saved kingdom is not an innocent kingdom. The 5 great knights do not emerge as untouched legends. They emerge as people who have paid enough to dislike being celebrated too quickly. Hegemol refuses a parade until the wounded Crossroads guards are named. Drea returns to the gardens immediately because victory does not trim thorns. Isma sleeps for 2 days under root cover, while Ogrim sits nearby pretending he has not been crying. Zima goes alone to the resting grounds and places her last petal on a grave. Ogrim tells every worker in the waterways that he personally frightened the sun away by smelling worse than it did. Half the workers believe he might be serious. The Pale King issues a proclamation, but it lands differently now. The people still revere him, but reverence has changed texture. They know the knights acted. They know the dreamers did not vanish into eternal sleep. They know old Radiance relics have been restored as history. They know the black egg was nearly a prison and became a battlefield instead. The king's light remains powerful, but it is no longer the only light Hallownest is allowed to speak of. That shift may be the deepest victory. The infection cannot return easily to a kingdom that has learnt to distrust any single brightness promising to solve everything alone. The Hollow Knight's future becomes one of the tenderest changes. Without the Black Egg prison, the child must become someone or something beyond purpose. That is not simple. A being created for emptiness does not suddenly know how to live because a ritual spared it. Hegemol takes the first responsibility, teaching it stance, balance, and the strange kindness of heavy armour. Drea teaches discipline without obedience. Isma teaches stillness among roots, where silence is not the same as absence. Ogrim tries to teach jokes and fails spectacularly, though the Hollow Knight may one day tilt its head in a way everyone insists is amusement. Zima teaches mourning, because even spared children must know what was done to their siblings. The Abyss becomes a place of public grief, not public access, not careless pilgrimage, and not spectacle. But the kingdom no longer pretends its foundation is clean. A memorial is carved above the sealed descent, not naming every vessel because many have no names, but acknowledging that they were born, used, abandoned, and remembered. The Pale King attends the first vigil and says almost nothing. Perhaps he cannot. The White Lady remains longer than anyone else. The Hollow Knight stands beside her, and no one asks it to represent the dead. It is allowed to stand as itself, which may be the first true mercy Hallownest gives it. The dreamers change as well. Monoman returns to the archives with a new doctrine. Knowledge without conscience becomes another plague. She preserves the facts of the infection and the mistakes that fed it. Lurien continues to watch the city, but he now trains others to watch with him. A single watcher can become a lonely seal. Many watchers can become a community of care. Hurrah returns to Deepnest with her bargain altered. She does not love Hallownest, but she respects the moment it did not take the easiest path. Hornet grows under that complicated inheritance, daughter of beast, pale blood, and a kingdom that almost became worse than its enemy. The Moth tribe begins the hardest healing. Some mourn the Radiance as creator, some fear her forever, some feel guilty for surviving after helping the Pale King replace her. Their restored rites are careful, unsentimental, and watched by those who know worship can slip into surrender. The seer becomes a guide not toward forgetting, but toward disciplined memory. Essence is collected and studied with humility. Dream is no longer treated as a private softness beneath the kingdom's notice. Dream becomes part of civic life, something to respect, guard, and speak about before it becomes a fever. The City of Tears changes in small ways that would be easy to miss. Rain still falls, elevators still hum, but new rest houses stand near the towers, with names carved above the doors. Lamps are dimmed in sleeping quarters so bright dreams do not find easy echoes. Children learn old and new histories together. The fountain in the ancient basin is altered, not destroyed. The king remains in stone, but beneath him smaller carvings appear over time. Root, flower, shield, nail, water, watchful eye. Beast mask, mothwing. Officially, no one knows who added them. Unofficially, Ogrim knows and refuses to confess. The Queen's gardens do not become peaceful overnight. The traitor Lord's faction still carries violence, pride and infection scars. Dryia continues to fight there, but in this path she does not die alone at the threshold. The mantises loyal to their own code help hold the line. Isma's roots repair what can be repaired. Zima visits the grave of her beloved without needing the entire kingdom to be dead around her. The White Lady does not withdraw as completely, though she is changed by grief and guilt. Dryia's fate becomes one of endurance rather than martyrdom, and that difference reshapes the garden's memory. Isma's grove becomes a healing place rather than a corpse shrine. Acid remains dangerous, because nature in Hallownest is rarely softened into pure comfort. But the grove becomes known as the place where boundaries saved lives. Bugs come there after dream fever, not to be magically cured, but to relearn the feeling of their own bodies. Isma teaches that healing is not return to the exact self before injury. It is learning which roots survived and which must be allowed to die. Ogrim visits often, pretending his duties bring him nearby. Nobody believes him. Isma lets him pretend. Hegemol's armour is never stolen in this version, or if a desperate maggot someday reaches for it, the story changes because Hegemol is awake to ask why. The False Night tragedy, born from a small creature wanting strength to protect others, becomes avoidable when the kingdom learns to notice small fear before it turns into theft. Hegemol starts training weak bugs who want protection, not as elite warriors, but as local defenders. He teaches them that strength is not the armour itself. Strength is knowing what the armour is for. A huge shell without a purpose becomes a hiding place. A small body with courage and community can become a guard. Ogrim's future is brighter, though not simple. He still loves the Pale Court, still remembers glory, still makes statues from the materials he knows best. But now the statues are not memorials for vanished friends. They are jokes, tributes, and living arguments with history. He builds one of Hegemol too large, one of Dryia too severe, one of Isma too beautiful for her liking, one of Zima so mysterious that even he admits it may look like a tall lump. He builds one of the Hollow Knight after much hesitation, not as the sealed saviour, but as a young figure standing outside a door that remains open. Zima becomes less isolated because grief no longer exiles her fully. Her love for the Mantis child still carries sorrow, and no victory returns the dead. But Hallownest, after the infection, has learned, partly through her, that grief spoken carefully can protect the living. She continues tending flowers from lands serene, and the kingdom treats them with a reverence that is not ownership. A delicate flower is placed at the Radiance Memorial, another near the Abyss Vigil, another in the gardens, another in the resting grounds. They are not decorations. They are reminders that purity is not the same as emptiness, and gentleness is not the same as weakness. The Soul Sanctum faces judgment. This is one of the places where the shape of victory must not become too sweet. The scholars who attempted to carve answers out of living bodies do not get to hide behind the final success. Monoman leads the inquiry, Dryia enforces it, and Isma insists that knowledge gained through cruelty be marked as contaminated even if it appears useful. Some scholars leave in disgrace. some remain under strict limits. A few become better because they are forced to treat living minds as more than material. Hallownest learns that defeating the infection also means defeating the habits that would have made new infections possible. Crystal Peak becomes quieter. Work resumes, but never again with the same blind hunger for production. Dream rotations, rest laws, and light exposure limits are established. The miners grumble, because workers always grumble when rules make the day slower, even if the rules save their lives. Myla, in this gentler path, keeps singing songs that belong to herself. Perhaps she still finds crystals beautiful. Perhaps she still works too hard. But the orange fever never takes her voice. That single spared song may be worth more than another monument in the city. Deepnest remains deepnest. That is part of the piece. Hallownest does not absorb it as a reward for cooperation. Hurrah would never allow that, and Zima would warn against it. The best outcome is not all lands becoming one obedient kingdom. The best outcome is borders that can warn one another without devouring one another. Hornet learns this lesson deeply. She is a child of crossing lines, but she is also a defender of boundaries. Later, if she stands before any other kingdom's holy machinery, she will remember that salvation without consent is another cage. The Pale King changes least, and that may be the most honest version. He does not suddenly become warm, humble, or easy to forgive. Gods do not always improve, because mortals teach one lesson well. He remains distant, brilliant, wounded by the loss of control, and haunted by futures where the knights failed. Yet he has been forced to witness a truth his foresight did not love. The imperfect living kingdom did what his perfect hidden plan could not. Whether that humbles him enough is uncertain. But the uncertainty is better than a sealed egg and a vanished palace. The White Lady changes more visibly. She remains strange, vast, rooted, and difficult to understand in ordinary terms, but her grief is no longer sealed away from action. She receives Dryar as guard, and as the one who helped keep her from disappearing into guilt. She tends memorial roots near the abyss. She watches the Hollow Knight learn existence without assigned doom. The Queen's role becomes less about producing salvation and more about sustaining repair. That is a quieter power, but perhaps a truer one. The Radiance remains as memory under strict rites. This may feel dangerous, and it is. Every year, moths and appointed dreamkeepers gather at the crown, the resting grounds, and the black egg to repeat the remembrance. They speak her name, her wrong, and her limit. The language is careful. No one asks her blessing. No one denies her origin. No one offers the kingdom's mines. Some bugs think even this is too much. Some think it is too little. That tension is healthy. A kingdom safe from gods should never become too comfortable with any ritual that touches one. The infection's defeat therefore becomes an ongoing practice rather than a single completed event. This is more mature than a perfect cure. The first disaster came from treating memory as something that could be buried forever. The new peace treats memory like a fire that must be tended, neither allowed to burn the house nor smothered until smoke poisons the walls. Hegemon's distributed shelters, Dryar's circles of readiness, Isma's healing boundaries, Zima's grief rites, and Ogrim's communal loyalty all become institutions. The 5 great knights are no longer merely protectors of a throne. They become the first teachers of a kingdom, learning how not to be possessed. If the small knight, the wandering vessel from the known future, still exists somewhere beyond the abyss, the entire shape of its life changes. Perhaps it never leaves Hallownest in the same way. Perhaps it emerges later into a kingdom that knows enough to be horrified and gentle at once. Instead of returning to ruins, it might return to a living memorial where no one pretends its siblings were mistakes without meaning. The night would still be quiet, still born from darkness, still tied to void. But its journey would not need to be the final correction of everyone else's failure. It might become a witness, a wanderer, or a small shadow learning what freedom feels like when the world has not already ended. That possibility is almost too tender for Hallownest, which is why it should be held gently. Hollow Knight's known beauty comes from ruin, silence, and the ache of arriving too late. This alternate Hallownest gives up some of that beauty for another kind. The beauty of lateness that was not final. The knights do not prevent every sin. They do not erase the abyss. They do not make the Pale King innocent. They do not turn the radiance into a harmless myth. They simply reach the decisive moment before the lock closes and choose the harder path of shared responsibility. Sometimes that is the difference between tragedy and survival. The 5 great knights themselves would be remembered differently. In the known ruins, their names are half erased, their forms uncertain, their deeds scattered. Lem knows of them as a group more than as people. Ogrim makes statues because memory has become private. In this better path, their individual names remain public, but not as empty legend. Hegemol is remembered for teaching strength to kneel, Drya for teaching protection to think, Isma for teaching kindness to keep boundaries, Zemma for teaching grief to refuse possession, Ogrim for teaching loyalty to laugh, question and endure. The group remains great, but greatness is no longer allowed to erase personhood. Over time, new myths would still form. They always do. Some bugs would say Hegemol held the entire sun on his back. Others would say Drya cut 1,000 dream swords in one breath. Isma would be said to have turned acid into rain. Zima would become the flower knight who made a god bow. Ogrim would personally encourage every exaggerated tale about himself, and then deny the most accurate ones. Myths are not evil by nature. The danger comes when myths replace the truth of cost. Hallownest's new historians, trained by Monomon's changed archive, make sure the histories include fear, argument, mistakes, and grief alongside heroism. The black egg remains sealed sometimes, but never as a tomb. It becomes a guarded shrine of boundary. No one enters casually. The lower void conduits are checked by Isma's successors. Flowers are replaced only by those trained in Zama's rites. Dreamers or their appointed heirs maintain periodic watches. The egg reminds Hallownest that some doors should exist, but doors are different from prisons. A prison hides a living burden away. A boundary protects life on both sides. The distinction becomes one of the central lessons taught after the infection. The king's old phrase fades from public use. No cost too great becomes something scholars cite with discomfort, a relic of the thinking that almost doomed the kingdom while trying to save it. In its place, a quieter sentence appears in guardhouses, sleep rooms and archives. No mind alone. Nobody knows who first said it. Some claim Hegemol. Some claim Monomon. Ogrim claims he said it while half asleep and nobody appreciated his genius at the time. The exact origin matters less than the meaning. The kingdom remembers that the Radiants conquered by invading minds one by one, and the king nearly answered by abandoning one mind completely. The new answer is fellowship without erasure. There would still be dissent. Some royal loyalists might resent the knights for weakening the aura of the throne. Some moths might secretly believe the Radiants deserved more. Some scholars might resent restrictions on their research. Some citizens might wish the whole truth had stayed buried, because truth makes sleep complicated. This dissent is not a flaw in the victory. It is proof that Hallownest remains alive. A dead kingdom agrees with itself perfectly. A living one argues, remembers, apologizes badly, fixes slowly, and keeps watch, because peace is never a machine that runs forever without hands. The most powerful image of this alternate ending may not be the dream battle at all. It may be an ordinary night years later. Rain falls in the city of tears. A miner sleeps without hearing the old light. A moth child learns a lament that remembers the Radiants without kneeling. Ogrim snores in a chair near Isma's grove. Dryer walks the garden path and finds no new bodies at the gate. Hegemol teaches a nervous little bug how to lift a shield. Zima replaces a flower at a grave. The Hollow Knight stands under an open arch, looking out at a kingdom that did not ask it to vanish. Nothing grand happens. That is the miracle. And yet miracles in Hallownest are never tidy. The kingdom survives, but survival begins a second story rather than closing the first. In the months after the infection fades, ordinary life becomes heavy with aftermath. Bugs who slept through the worst wake to find that their neighbours remember things differently. Some swear they heard the Radiants promise mercy. Some remember only heat. Some cannot bear moth songs, even the corrected laments. Others begin visiting old shrines too often, not from madness exactly, but from the strange homesickness that follows any encounter with a power larger than the self. The knights have defeated the plague, but they cannot defeat the ache it leaves behind. That work belongs to years. Hegemol becomes patient with survivors in a way that changes the whole idea of strength in Hallownest. Before the war, great strength often meant the ability to stand at the gate, break an enemy line, or carry armour no one else could lift. Afterward, Hegemol is most often seen sitting beside bugs who cannot yet sleep safely. He does not always speak. His presence is the speech. Those who wake from Radiant's dreams often need to know that something large and calm remains in the room. His shield rests nearby, but his hands are empty. In time, people begin saying that Hegemol's greatest defence was not against blades or beams, but against the loneliness that lets a nightmare grow. Dryer becomes less easy for legends to soften. Survivors want to imagine her as pure fierceness, a white blade moving through golden infection without doubt. But the real Dryer, in this version, refuses that flattening. She speaks openly to younger guards about hesitation, fear, triage, and the cost of deciding who can be saved first. She teaches that discipline is not the absence of emotion. It is the shape emotion must take when others depend on you. The Queen's gardens become her school as much as her post. Students learn footwork among roots and thorns, but they also learn to ask whether an order protects life or merely protects authority. That lesson carries farther than the garden paths. Isma's kindness becomes almost institutional, though she would dislike that word. Her grove sends trained healers into Greenpath, the city, the fungal wastes, and even the edges of Deepnest. They do not wear shining symbols. They carry root pouches, bitter tinctures, sleep charms, and small lamps covered in green cloth. Isma insists every healer learn the difference between comfort and consent. No patient is to be soothed into silence because silence is easier for the room. The Radiants used comfort as a hook. Hallinist's healers must therefore make care honest, even when honesty hurts. This turns Isma's legacy into something stronger than softness. It becomes a discipline of gentle truth. Zima remains partly apart, because some souls are shaped that way even in better worlds. The victory does not erase exile, lost love, or the distance between lands serene and Hallowest. But her apartness no longer becomes abandonment. She travels between graves, borders, and old enemies, carrying flowers where words are still too sharp. The Mantis tribe respects her not because she is harmless, but because she understands devotion without surrender. In the gardens, the grave of the traitor lord's daughter becomes a place where mantises and Hallinist bugs sometimes stand at different hours, never quite together, yet no longer separated by hatred alone. Zima does not heal history. She gives history a place to kneel without lying. Ogrim becomes the keeper of ridiculous continuity. That sounds small until a kingdom nearly lost itself to a dream of perfect brightness. After the infection, Hallinist needs someone who remembers that the body is funny, that work is smelly, that heroes slip, that kings can be wrong, that friends should be teased while they are still alive. Ogrim keeps the waterways running, but he also keeps grandeur from becoming dangerous again. When ceremonies grow too stiff, he coughs at the worst possible moment. When statues become too solemn, he adds a detail that makes Hegemol look embarrassed. He preserves reverence by making sure reverence never becomes worship without breath. The relationship between the five deepens after the battle, because they have seen one another tempted. This matters. Many friendships survive danger, but fewer survive knowledge. Hegemol knows Drya fears failing those she-guards. Drya knows Isma's kindness can bleed her dry. Isma knows Zema carries grief like a second blade. Zema knows Ogrim's laughter has a lonely edge. Ogrim knows Hegemol sometimes mistakes being strong for being responsible for everything. They do not weaponize these truths. They use them to keep one another alive. When Hegemol takes on too much, Ogrim complains loudly until others help. When Drea grows too severe, Isma asks her to sit among the roots. When Zema disappears too long, Hegemol sends no soldiers, only a flower pot with a terrible note from Ogrim attached. The Pale Court changes in subtler ways. It remains a court, still full of hierarchy, ritual, and the king's pale distance. But the five great knights no longer function merely as royal instruments. They become a balance the court must account for. A noble who proposes secrecy is asked what secrecy will feed. A scholar who proposes sacrifice is asked who consented. a guard who proposes force is asked whether force will prevent infection or imitate it. These questions do not make Hellenist perfect. They make it harder for the kingdom to drift into beautiful cruelty without resistance. Sometimes history is saved by questions becoming customary. The Pale King, in later years, may retreat inward anyway. He is too old in his nature, too shaped by worm memory and foresight, to become fully present among ordinary lives. But he cannot vanish into the White Palace as cleanly as he does in the known ruin. The roots keep him connected. The dreamers preserve accounts. The knights keep watch. The spared Hollow Knight remains a living contradiction to his certainty. Perhaps the king spends long hours studying that silent child from a distance, not as tool, not quite as offspring, but as proof of a mistake that did not finish becoming irreversible. If he feels love, it is trapped under too much pride to move easily. Still, sometimes even trapped love changes the temperature of a room. The Hollow Knight's own development would be slow, strange, and difficult to describe. It may never become expressive in the way ordinary bugs expect. It may never speak. It may prefer still corridors, high ledges, and the quiet outside training yards after everyone else leaves. Yet a life does not need to perform normalcy to be a life. The knights learn this gradually. Ogrim stops demanding visible amusement from his jokes and begins accepting the slight tilt of the head as answer enough. Isma notices which plants the Hollow Knight pauses near. Dryer notices that it practices movements only after watching others use them to protect, never to boast. Hegemol notices that it stands closer to frightened bugs than to cheering ones. Zima notices that it lingers near graves without being told what grief is. That might be the deepest healing Hallowist receives, learning to recognize personhood without demanding familiar proof. The vessel plan depended on denying the inner life of beings who are inconvenient to pity. If the kingdom survives by admitting the Hollow Knight's possible selfhood, then the moral logic of the entire society shifts. Other quiet bugs are treated differently. The strange, the silent, the small, the damaged, the masked, the foreign, and the grief-struck find a little more room. Hallowist remains hierarchical, but less certain that rank determines worth. A kingdom that once listened only to pale command begins, slowly, to listen for subtler signs of life. The Abyss Memorial changes the pilgrims who visit it. They descend only to the permitted threshold, never to the sea below, and each visitor must carry a light that is covered before reaching the final chamber. This ritual is deliberate. Uncovered light would be disrespectful there. At the threshold, bugs stand in dimness and hear water or void or imagination moving far beneath them. No speech is required. Some leave tokens, some leave nothing. The Hollow Knight visits rarely, and when it does, the chamber is cleared. No one watches except those it chooses. The dead siblings are not turned into a public lesson at the expense of the one who survived. The Radiance Memorial is the opposite. It stands in open air near the crown, where brightness can be watched without being obeyed. Moth elders tend it with care and caution. No one kneels there by law. Some bow from grief, some stand stiffly from resentment, some refuse to go. All three responses are permitted. That permission protects the right from becoming another single mind. The radiance is given memory, but not mastery. The difference must be practiced in public, because private shame was the first doorway she used. Hallownest learns that dangerous history should not be hidden only because it is dangerous. It should be handled where enough eyes can see, when handling becomes worship. Greenpath and the fungal wastes retain their own dream traditions. This is another major change. The Pale King's Hallownest once tended to absorb and rename, turning older powers into scenery around its own order. After the infection, the kingdom becomes more cautious. Un's dream is respected as distinct. The Mushroom Clan's shared thought is studied with consent rather than treated as a curiosity or threat. This diversity of minds becomes part of the defence. If the Radiance ever presses again, she will find not one grand silence, but many different modes of being awake. A forest dream, a fungal chorus, a beast mind, a moth lament, a city watch, a root memory, a nightly oath. No single god can easily claim them all at once. The economy of Hallownest shifts too, in ways less poetic but deeply important. Shorter mind cycles mean fewer crystals at first. Waterway repairs cost labour and geo. Sleep houses need staffing. Archives need scribes. Healers need supplies. There are complaints, shortages and arguments over who pays for the new safety. This should not be skipped, because real survival always becomes practical. A kingdom can make one heroic decision and still fail later through budgets, fatigue and resentment. Hegemol and Ogrim become unexpectedly important in these disputes because both understand work from the ground. Hegemol listens. Ogrim translates noble language into something workers can mock and understand. Slowly systems form. The Grim Troop, if it ever passes near this version of Hallownest, would find a kingdom less vulnerable to ritual seduction. The Nightmare Heart feeds through performance, flame, and repeated cycles of summoning and renewal. A Hallownest that has already survived the Radiance would recognise the beauty and danger of ritualised dependence. That does not mean Grim could not enter. Hollow Knight's world is too strange for any kingdom to be immune to every power. But the citizens would ask better questions. What does the ritual feed? Who must burn? What repeats because it is meaningful? And what repeats because something ancient is hungry? The infection's defeat gives Hallownest a language for later temptations. Godhome would also feel different if the Godseekers reached this surviving kingdom. They seek gods, attunement, ascension and the highest light. In the known path, their hunger can pull the Radiance into an even more absolute form. In this alternate Hallownest, the Godseekers would be treated with immense caution. Monoman would study them. Zima would dislike their hunger for divine hierarchy. Drya would post guards near any ritual that ranks beings by strength alone. Ogrim would probably offend them by asking whether their highest god knows how to clean a drain. The joke would hide a serious point. Hallownest has already learned that worship of the highest can become blindness to the living. The spared kingdom would still produce wanderers. Peace does not mean everyone stays. Some bugs would leave because the post-infection rituals feel too heavy. Some would go seeking lost relatives. Some would carry Hallownest's new practices into other lands. A healer trained by Isma might reach a distant village where dreams have begun to sour. A moth taught in the new Laments might teach another people how to remember a dangerous god without kneeling. A small guard trained under Hegemol might protect a caravan, because strength once shared travels. In that way, the 5 great knights defeat more than one outbreak. They change the kind of story Hallownest sends into the world. Hornet's future becomes especially interesting. Without the same ruined kingdom to guard, she may become less solitary, though never less sharp. She grows between Deepnest and Hallownest with living examples of contested loyalty. Her mother did not have to sleep forever. The Hollow Knight did not have to vanish into the egg. The Pale King did not get every answer he wanted. The White Lady remained present enough to be argued with. The 5 great knights showed that love of a kingdom can mean refusal. A hornet raised among those lessons would still wield needle and silk with ferocity, but her suspicion of pale beings would have a different foundation. She would know they can be resisted before the ruin is complete. If she later encountered a distant land ruled by silk and song, she would carry Hallownest's saved history like a hidden blade. She would recognize holy music that feeds on bodies. She would recognize pilgrimage turned into machinery. She would recognize a bound hire being turned into the center of a system that lies about its own hunger. But she would also remember that the answer is not always to replace one prison with another. The 5 great knights' victory would teach her to seek the pressure points: memory, labour, consent, grief, boundaries, and the small lives hidden beneath majestic language. In that sense, Hallownest's survival could echo far beyond its caverns. The final fates of the knights need not be immortal. In fact, they should not be. Let them age. Let Hegemol one day remove his armour because others can now carry the shield. Let Dryia remain formidable until her steps slow. Then become the teacher whose silence still straightens every student in the garden. Let Isma root more deeply into her grove by choice, rather than vanish as a forgotten remnant. Let Zima continue walking between graves and borders until distance calls her home, or until home becomes wherever the flowers still bloom. Let Ogrim outlive some of them, because love often leaves the most loyal with the longest memory. Let his statues become acts of remembrance rather than desperate denial. When the first of the 5 dies, Hallownest faces a test almost as important as the dream battle. Can it mourn a hero without turning them into a tool? Can it remember Hegemol or Dryia or Isma or Zema or Ogrim without making their memory command the living? Zema's grief rites guide the answer. The funeral names the virtues and the flaws. It leaves room for laughter if Ogrim is involved, which he absolutely insists upon, even if the funeral is his own. The dead are honoured as people, not converted into fuel for the next ideology. This is how the kingdom proves it truly learned from the Radiance's return. Centuries later, ruins may still come. Nothing in Hollow Knight's world promises that any kingdom lasts forever. Stone cracks. Roots overgrow. Stagways empty. Archives gather dust. Even a saved Hallownest might decline through age, migration, politics, or some other power rising from places no one thought to watch. But the quality of the ruin would be different. Instead of a kingdom frozen around one sealed failure, it would leave behind archives of argument, memorials of admitted guilt, and signs that its people once turned away from sacrifice at the last moment. A wanderer finding those ruins would feel sorrow, and perhaps instruction too. That is why this alternate story belongs so naturally to the 5 great knights. Each of them is already a fragment in the known world, a suggestion of loyalty that could not save the kingdom from the path its ruler chose. Giving them victory does not mean pretending they are stronger than gods in a simple contest. It means letting their virtues combine into the answer Hallownest lacked. Hegemol's shelter, Drear's discernment, Isma's healing boundary, Zima's honest grief, and Ogrim's loyal humanity together form a philosophy opposite to the vessel plan. The king wanted emptiness to contain a god. The knights create fullness strong enough to deny one. The infection in this telling is defeated because Hallownest stops behaving like an infected mind. It stops repeating one command from one light. It stops hiding pain in sealed chambers. It stops confusing silence with purity. It stops demanding that the smallest and quietest bear the greatest burden. The radiance is powerful because she offers wholeness without freedom. The Pale King's plan is horrifying because it offers salvation without consent. The five great knights find the narrow road between those two violences. They protect selfhood without denying memory. They use darkness without sacrificing children to it. They honour light without letting it rule. One last layer sits inside the word defeat. To defeat the infection does not mean to make Hallownest forget fear. It means fear no longer governs the answer. The Pale King feared the radiance, so he searched for perfect control. The radiance feared oblivion, so she reached for perfect remembrance. The infected feared separation, so they accepted a mind that was not their own. Against all of that, the five great knights build a peace that accepts fear without letting it choose the method. Hegemol is afraid and still shares the shield. Drear is afraid and still thinks before she cuts. Isma is afraid and still sets boundaries around care. Zima is afraid and still says goodbye honestly. Ogrim is afraid and still laughs in the dark. The kingdom learns from them that courage is not the burning away of fear. It is fear given good work. This is also why the saved Hallownest would feel different from a perfect kingdom. Perfection was always part of the danger. A perfect vessel, a perfect seal, a perfect king, a perfect dream of unity under the radiance. The knight's answer is full of flaws, which means it can breathe. Guards forget lines and must be corrected. Mothrites change wording when old phrases feel too close to worship. Waterway repairs fail and have to be rebuilt. Flowers wilt and need replacing. Ogrim exaggerates his role until Drear threatens to make him teach beginner footwork for a month. Hegemol apologizes too often for things beyond his reach. Isma takes on too many patients until Zemma quietly closes the Grove Gate for an afternoon. The whole piece survives because it is maintained by living people, not frozen inside one flawless act. The Radiance's remaining memory becomes a warning against every beautiful command that asks the self to disappear. The Abyss becomes a warning against every practical plan that asks the voiceless to pay silently. Between those warnings, Hallownest has room to grow more carefully. A child in the city can learn both stories in the same lesson, the old light that wanted all minds, and the Pale King who nearly gave one mind to save the rest. Neither warning cancels the other. Together they teach a deeper suspicion of salvation that arrives too cleanly. When a solution leaves no grief, no argument, and no one responsible afterward, Hallownest learns to look again. Perhaps that is what the five great knights truly defend in the end, the right to remain particular. Hegemol particular in his size and gentleness, Dryia particular in her fierce care, Isma particular in her rooted kindness, Zemma particular in her foreign grief and quiet flowers, Ogrim particular in his ridiculous, loyal, earthy heart. The radiance would have made them one brightness. The king's plan would have made one child into the absence of all particular things. Their victory preserves difference. It lets Hallownest be a city, a nest, a grove, a mine, a waterway, a grave field, a palace, a garden, a fungal road, a stag station, and a dark sealed depth, without forcing all those places to mean the same thing. So when the caverns grow quiet again, the peace is not empty. It has weight, roots, names and work still waiting. Somewhere under the city, water moves through conduits Ogrim helped clear. Somewhere in the gardens, Drya's students practice listening before drawing their nails. Somewhere near the crossroads, a small bug lifts a shield too large for them, while Hegemol patiently adjusts their stance. Somewhere in Isma's grove, a fevered sleeper wakes to their own name. Somewhere in the resting grounds, Zima lays a flower down and walks away without asking grief to disappear. Somewhere near the Black Egg, the Hollow Knight stands outside the door, and the door remains open. That is the soft heart of this other Hallownest. The five great knights do not win because they are flawless. They win because none of them is enough alone, and for once the kingdom understands that as strength rather than weakness. They defeat the infection by refusing both of its mirrors, the Radiance's burning togetherness and the Pale King's lonely containment. They choose a harder, humbler kind of survival, one made from memory, boundaries, care, laughter, watchfulness, and shared burden. The light is remembered, the darkness is respected, the child is spared, the kingdom breathes, and now the old caverns can settle. The rain above the City of Tears keeps falling, soft and endless. The crossroads rest under lantern glow instead of fever. The gardens hold their thorns without screaming. The waterways rumble with life below the streets. In the distance a moth song rises, not as worship, not as surrender, but as a careful remembrance of what almost took everything. The five knights pass into legend slowly, warmly, imperfectly. Their victory is not a perfect kingdom. It is a kingdom that learned, just in time, that no mind should be left alone with a god, a secret, or a grief too large to carry. And in that gentler darkness, Hallownest sleeps without the orange light behind its eyes,